How's it going, everyone? Welcome back. Hopefully, you guys been doing well. I apologize for the last episode's audio. Like I said, I still don't have my full setup, so I'm kind of just bearing with it. We are kind of experimenting with the setup here until I can get my full setup back, get my equipment back, get my setup back. Like I said, just set up back in the office compared to down here where it's more open. Hopefully, it's not as, I don't know, echoey. You guys can hear me better this time. Again, I do apologize because back in a military base, back in military housing, and people out there doing yard work, which is crazy because it started at 7 a.m. here. So, anyways, if you guys have been following with me, I have moved from Japan. I've spent about 3.5 years in Japan. Just moved here recently to Catania, Sicily. So that is a huge change. Culture wise, yes, definitely. So so I lived in Nagasaki. So I lived down there. I went to Fukuoka, to the airport, took that to Tokyo, from Tokyo to Rome, then Rome to Catania. And going from Fukuoka to Tokyo, it was a very quiet flight because it's mostly Japanese. Same thing with going from Tokyo to Rome. It was a mixture of Japanese and Italian, but at my flight was still mostly Japanese, so it was still a very quiet flight. But obviously, Rome to Catania was mostly Italians, and that was the loudest flight I've ever been on. And I've been on flights before going to New York City, and it was just crazy. And trying to get to my seat, like people were still talking to who they knew in other rows. And apparently I was the bad person because they were standing in the middle of the aisleway talking to the person, and I was interrupting their conversation, trying to walk to my seat. So, yep, that's on me for just wanting to get to my seat, I guess. Other than that, yeah, Japan was so clean, you barely saw trash anywhere. Here, I feel like there is trash everywhere. Graffiti everywhere. Driving is insane because here in Sicily, I feel like they just make up their own rules when it comes to driving. It is crazy. Just crazy. There's also back in Japan, there was so many convenience stores. I could just walk to a convenience store and get something to eat. There's a restaurant quality food there. Here in Sicily, I have not seen one convenience store. Now, when you do see gas stations, that's all it is. It's literally just the pumps, and that's it. There's no building for you to go in. No convenience store. It's definitely different. That Japan was so safe. I could literally feel like I could walk anywhere, even at night, be safe. Sicily, I had to get an anti-theft bag. Hopefully, I'll be fine. Anyways, if you go to the Phantom Navigator Facebook page, I have posted photos of some photos around here, especially when I explore. Have seen some old Roman amphitheater ruins. You can see that. I also posted some pictures of Mount Etna. So I do have depending on where I walk to or move to or drive to, I do have a pretty good view of Mount Etna. And Mount Etna has been in some Roman mythology. And there's also near here, Catania, there is Cyclops Island. Have you ever heard of that in Greek mythology? Yeah. They say the earth breathes, but here in Mount Etna, it smokes like it has secrets. Welcome back to the podcast where myths don't die. They just wait under the surface. Tonight, we descend into fire, into legend, into a place where gods punished monsters and may have accidentally created one. Mount Etna is not just Europe's most active volcano. And the good news is if it does erupt, I'm not anywhere near I'll be in danger, so don't worry. It's a geological middle finger to its concept of peace and quiet. For thousands of years, people have watched it erupt, lava spilling like divine rage, ash falling like burnt prayers. But the ancient Greeks didn't think this was random. No. They thought something was trapped beneath it. Something big. Something angry. Something one-eyed. According to Greek mythology, beneath Etna's molten heart lived the Cyclops. Giants with a single eye and apparently a serious anger management problem. These weren't just mindless beasts. They were blacksmiths, divine ones, forging weapons for the gods themselves, including the thunderbolts of Zeus. So when Etna erupts, the ancients didn't see lava. They saw sparks from forge. They heard metal screaming under a hammer, which honestly is way more metal than geology. Imagine being so bad at your job, your workplace becomes a volcano. But wait, it gets worse. Because some myths say it wasn't just Cyclops under Etna, it was Typhon, a creature so horrifying even the gods panicked. Hundreds of serpent heads, fire in his eyes, a voice that sounds like every nightmare arguing at once. When Typhon challenged Zeus, the battle was apocalyptic. And when Zeus finally won, he buried Typhon beneath Mount Etna. So every eruption, every tremor, might just be Typhon shifting in his prison. Sleep paralysis, but for an entire volcano. Now let's drift the coast of Catania to the eerie, jagged Cyclops Islands. These black volcanic rocks rise from the sea like broken teeth. Geologists say they're remnants of ancient eruptions. But mythology? Oh, mythology says something far more dramatic. This is where the Cyclops, Polyphemus, hurled the massive boulders at Odysseus after being blinded. Yes, blinded. By a guy whose greatest skill was lying and running away. Nothing says, I'm over it, like throwing islands at someone. Those stones, they missed. Barely. And now they sit there, silent evidence of a myth that refuses to sink. Nearby whispers also connect Etna to Hecate, goddess of magic, ghosts, and crossroads. Because what is a volcano if not a crossroads between worlds? Above the living, below fire, death, and whatever we pretend isn't there. Ancient rituals were said to be performed in volcanic regions, offerings tossed into flames, messages sent to the underworld. Nothing delivers a prayer faster than throwing it into a volcano. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. Even today, people report strange phenomena around Etna, lights moving where no aircraft should be, sounds beneath the ground, not quite seismic, sudden temperature drops in otherwise warm areas. Scientists call it natural. Locals, they call it familiar. Because when you grow up near a mountain that never stops breathing, you stop assuming it's just a rock. So, what is Mount Etna? A volcano? A prison? A forge for the gods? Or just a place where ancient stories refuse to die quietly? Maybe the Greeks weren't explaining the volcano, maybe they were remembering something. Because when the earth growls, it's polite to assume something down there still has teeth. Sleep well tonight. And if you ever find yourself near Etna and the ground starts to tremble, just remember that might not be an eruption, it might be something turning over and realizing you're standing above it. So far, we've talked about gods, monsters, and myth. But let's be honest, humans have never needed mythology to make things unsettling. Because around Mount Etna, the strangest stories aren't always the oldest ones. Some of them are recent. There's a quiet theory, whispered, not published, that Etna isn't just a volcano. It's hollow, not metaphorically, physically. The idea? Beneath the magma chambers lies a vast network of tunnels, not entirely natural. Some claim they extend far beyond Etna, connecting deep into Sicily, even under the sea. Officially, lava tubes, geological formations. Unofficially, something more organized, too structured, too precise, too intentional. Because nothing says natural formation like architecture with better planning than modern cities. And where there are tunnels, there are always theories about who or what uses them. Some locals and fringe researchers claim there are restricted zones on Etna that don't appear on tourist maps. Areas where access is quietly denied. Areas where helicopters pass without explanation. The theory? A subterranean facility hidden beneath the volcano. Not abandoned, active. Whether it's military, experimental, or something far less explainable. Depends on who you ask. Because if you were hiking something mysterious, you'd probably put it under a literal volcano too. Now things get brighter. Around Catania and Etna slopes, there have been decades of reports. Strange lights hovering near the crater, objects moving against the wind, sudden disappearances into the mountain itself, not passing over, not flying away, entering. Like Etna isn't just a volcano, but a doorway. Some UFO researchers suggest volcanic sites are energy hotspots, places where the boundary between environments thin. which raises a fun question. Are we a volcano? Or are they studying us? Out by the Cyclops Islands, things get quieter, but no less strange. Divers have reported unusual magnetic interference, equipment malfunctioning without cause, a persistent feeling of being watched. And then there are the shapes. Rock formations that look almost carved, almost placed. Now, erosion can do a lot, but it doesn't usually leave things feeling deliberate. When rocks start looking intentional, it's time to question who had the intention. Some of the oldest locals, some of the oldest local stories don't talk about gods or aliens. They talk about something simpler, something watching, a guardian, a presence tied to Etna, not hostile, not friendly, just aware. People describe a sense of being observed on the mountain at night, footsteps with no source, shadows that don't match the light. And before you dismiss it as imagination, ask yourself why the same feeling shows up in the same place for generations. Patterns are just coincidences that refuse to behave. Here's where it all starts to blur. Ancient Greeks said something was trapped beneath Etna. Modern theories say something might be built beneath it. Both agree on one thing. There's more under that mountain that we're comfortable admitting. So what if Typhon wasn't just a story? What if the Cyclops weren't just metaphors? What if myths weren't explanations, but memories? Because whether it's gods, monsters, hidden bases, or things that don't need names, Mount Etna has always had a reputation, not just for erupting, but for keeping things inside. And the real question isn't what's under Etna, it's whether it knows what's above it. Stay curious, stay cautious. If you ever see lights disappearing into a mountain, maybe don't follow them. Some doors are meant to be opened, especially the ones that were never built by us. At the base of Mount Etna flows something unexpected. The Alcantara Gorge, a river cutting through black volcanic rock, not carved slowly over millions of years, but violently, suddenly. Legend says the philosopher Empedocles once threw himself into Etna to prove he was immortal. Spoiler? He wasn't. But here's the detail people don't like to dwell on. His body was never found. Only one bronze sandal, allegedly spat back up by the volcano. Etna doesn't return what it takes unless it wants to make a point. When Christianity arrived, the myths didn't disappear. They adapted. In Catania, the story of Saint Agatha became deeply tied to Etna. She was martyred brutally. And after her death, eruptions threatened the city. So locals carried her veil towards the lava, and the lava stopped. Multiple times across history, people claim her relics has halted eruptions. Science says coincidence. Locals say protection. When your city's emergency plan involves a saint and a volcano, you don't ask too many questions. Most lava flows Most lava flows follow predictable patterns. Gravity, terrain, physics, but Etna? There are documented cases where lava has split unexpectedly, changed directions, even slowed near certain areas. Some researchers chalk it up to underground structures. Others, they just say it feels selective. Like something is choosing where destruction goes. Natural disasters aren't supposed to have senses. Locals sometimes call Etna the breathing one. Not poetically, literally. There are moments, especially at night, where the mountain emits a low frequency sound. Not eruption, not tremors, just a deep, rhythmic resonance. Almost like breathing. Scientists link it to gas movement and pressure shifts. But hearing it in person, it doesn't sound like geology. It sounds like something's asleep. If a mountain sounds alive, maybe don't wait around to see if it wakes up. Across ancient cultures, volcanic sites were often seen as entrances to the underworld. Etna was no exception. The Greeks believed it connected to Tartarus, a place deeper than hell, a prison for monsters, a place you don't escape from, which makes Etna less of a mountain and more of a lid. Volcanoes don't erupt, they leak. Some hikers and climbers have reported something harder to explain: lost time. Short hikes that take hours longer than expected. Moments where watches stop. Or worse, where everything feels normal until later. And you realize something doesn't add up. These accounts are rare, but consistent, and always near the same areas. It's not getting lost that's scary, it's not knowing when it happened. Here's the unsettling part. Every culture that has touched Mount Etna gave it a different explanation. Greeks, monsters and gods. Christians, saints and miracles. Modern minds, geology. And the occasional classified rumor. Different stories, same feeling, that something about this place isn't finished. Because when a location collects this many legends, it stops being coincidence and starts being evidence. So whether it's a forge of gods, a prison for monsters, a gateway for something deeper, or just a volcano that refuses to behave, Mount Etna doesn't just erupt. It remembers, and maybe it waits. And next time you hear the earth rumble, ask yourself, is it pressure? Or is it something trying to be heard? So far, we talked about gods, monsters, saints, aliens maybe? But now we get into the stories people don't like repeating twice. The ones that don't come from books. They come from people who swear they saw something move where nothing should. Around Mount Etna, there are no official cryptids, not nearly packaged creatures with merchandise and documentary, just things. In Sicilian folklore, there is something called the I'm going to say this wrong. U Munaciḍḍu. It translates to the little monk, which sounds harmless, adorable even. It's not. Described as a spotted figure, it's said to wander homes, caves, and rural areas near Etna. Sometimes helpful, sometimes not. It's hidden objects. It hides objects, whispers at night, sits on your chest while you're sleeping, and occasionally it laughs. If something laughs in the dark and you didn't tell a joke, you're the punchline. Some say it's a spirit, others say it's something older. Something that learned early that being small makes you underestimated. There are stories from hikers, especially those who wander too far or stay too late, of figures moving along the hardened lava fields. Tall, distorted, not quite human, not quite solid. They don't approach. They don't chase. They just keep pace. Always the same edge of your vision. And when you turn fully, nothing. Just black rock. Still warm. When the shadows don't match the light, it's time to question the light. Locals don't give them names because naming something makes it real. And some things, they prefer plausible deniability. Across Europe, there are legends of spectral black dogs, guardians, omens, warnings, and yes, Etna has one too. Witnesses described a large, shadow-like canine seen along remote paths on the mountain. Glowing eyes, silent steps. It doesn't attack. It doesn't bark. It just appears, watches, and disappears. Usually right before something goes wrong. A fall, a sudden storm, an eruption shift. If a ghost dog is judging you, you're already made a bad decision. Some believe it's guardian. Others think it's something that shows up when you've already crossed a line you weren't supposed to. We talked about Polyphemus, the Cyclops myth. Blinded, angry, throwing islands like emotional baggage. But here's the incomparable question. What if he wasn't the only one? Some local legends suggest that caves and lava tubes around Etna were never empty. That something large once lived there, and maybe never fully left. There are reports of deep, rhythmic sounds from within cave systems, footprints that don't match any known animal. The feeling, again, that something is watching from higher ground. If you hear footsteps in a cave that echo twice, you're not alone. After eruptions, when ash settles over nearby towns, some people report hearing things at night. Not loud, not clear, but voices. carried by the wind, too structured to be random, too faint to understand, and always gone by morning. Scientists say it's acoustic illusion, winds moving through uneven terrain, but people who've heard it, they don't describe noise. They describe conversation. When the wind starts talking, maybe don't try to listen closer. Here's something interesting. Ask enough locals carefully, and you'll notice a pattern. There's an unspoken rule about Etna. You don't stay too long after dark. You don't wander off marked paths. And you definitely don't go looking for whatever stories you just heard. Not because you'll find nothing, but because you might find something that notices you back. Curiosity didn't kill the cat, something it found did. So, what lives around Mount Etna? Officially, nothing unusual. Unofficially, enough to keep people telling stories in low voices. Because maybe there aren't cryptids here. Maybe there are categories. Maybe Etna doesn't produce creatures, it produces experiences. And sometimes those experiences follow you home. And if something from Etna does follow you, just remember, you were the one who went looking first. Sleep well, or don't. Either way, keep the lights on. Not because it keeps things away, but because it lets you see them sooner. And so, we leave Mount Etna the same way most people do. Quietly, carefully, pretending we understand it. But Etna doesn't ask to be understood. It doesn't care about our science, our myths, our desperate need to explain things that make us uncomfortable. Because whether it's Typhons shifting in the dark, the Cyclops hammering out something we were not meant to see, or just the Earth itself, reminding us who's in charge, the result is the same. The ground trembles, the air thickens, and something ancient exhales. We like to think monsters are stories, that they belong to the past, that they stay where we put them in books, in myths, in late night podcasts we listen to just to feel something. But places like Etna don't let stories stay buried. They resurface, they erupt, they wait. Because nothing truly dangerous announces itself. It just makes itself known. So if you ever find yourself standing on that mountain, watching the smoke curl into the sky, feeling the ground shift just slightly beneath your feet, ask yourself one question. Not what is this place, but what has this place been hiding successfully for thousands of years? And more importantly, why is it still hiding it? Anyway, sleep tight, avoid active volcanoes, ignore whispering winds, and if you hear footsteps behind you when you know you're alone, don't panic. It's probably nothing. It's never nothing.